Call to order, Town of Prescott Valley Work Study meeting, May 20th, 2020. Just so everyone knows, I'm sure you're already aware, check us out on Channel 56, or you can also go live stream at pbaz.granicus.com. There's just a lot going on with that, so hopefully you pulled it up off of the Town of Prescott Valley Work Study agenda to see where you're going to go, and you can watch it on WebEx as well. So, of course, there's no comments from the public, and that's about it. With that being said, clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Hunt.
Here.
Councilmember Schumacher.
Present.
Councilmember Packard.
Present.
Councilmember Grossman.
I'm here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Nye.
Here.
Mayor Polguta.
Present.
We have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Tarkowski, you just want to take it away?
Mayor and Council, good evening and welcome to our budget process. Just a brief synopsis of what's been going on. If you will recall, we started the budget process in early November, and we had a retreat where we meaning staff, heard from Mayor and Council what you wanted to see happen in the new fiscal year. And we had some financial projections made by the finance department. Essentially, Katie gave you a PowerPoint talking about projected revenues and the flexibility that we would have in the budget. We heard from you what you wanted from a policy perspective. We then went and had a series of 6 open houses that we held around the community, where we invited the community to come out and give input on the budget and the budgeting process. We reconvened in January, where you heard from department heads on what they intended to do in the new fiscal year based on your directions in the first retreat and based on input from the open houses that we had. And so, as a result, they put together a work plan for the new fiscal year within the parameters that the finance department had laid out in terms of revenue projections going forward. So, taking a look at that process that we have in place and at the revenue projections, we can blame all of this on Katie because her projections didn't take into account a coronavirus. And that's her fault, I guess. I don't know who else we can blame. But as you are all aware, in late March, we had a bug insert itself into our budgeting process. And in these very turbulent times, we find ourselves throwing out or needing to throw out the lion's share of the budgeting work that had been done starting back in November. Well, we didn't entirely scuttle it. You will find, if you refer to the letter from the manager to council and the citizens, that contained in that are a number of the projects that you had identified that you wanted to see accomplished this year. They're highlighted in red. And there's a reason for that. We are proposing to you that our budget process this year will be unlike any other in the history of the town of Prescott Valley. And that means that we are going to go through the process of tonight, tomorrow night. We will have your input. We will then be coming back to adopt a draft budget, and then from there go to a budget adoption so that we are able to start off the new fiscal year July 1. What we have done is made significant cuts in the revenue projections and also in expenditures. Having said that, Katie is going to go through with you a PowerPoint identifying things that are included in the budget, many of which, and some big dollar items, are contained in the budget, although we don't intend to make those capital improvements. or we don't intend to hire any of those employees I identified if we haven't got the revenue. But if we don't identify them, and if we don't have the budgetary room to go ahead and make those hires, then we're unable to do it, or we're unable to make a road improvement or a splash pad or any of those things that were identified very early on. And so what you've got in front of you, and as I say, Katie's going to go through that with you, we have the expenditure capability in the event revenue comes back. Now, I would submit to you that what we are doing is taking the first step of a two-step process. We're proposing that we are going to reconvene the budgetary process at the end of the first quarter, meaning in October. We're going to come back together, staff, and we're going to take a look at the dollars that have come in or failed to come in, and then make some additional recommendations to carry us through the remainder of the fiscal year. Whether they're increasing or decreasing will all be determined by revenue. And so it would seem to indicate that there is going to be some measure of a recovery. Nobody knows to what extent that may happen. And as I've been talking to the employees for the last couple of days, ASU, Arizona State University, has come out with a report last week that shows a very steep V recovery scheme. The one leg going down, indicating the very deep loss of revenue statewide and economic activity, but then a very steep recovery, meaning a V. I would disagree. I believe that the recovery is going to take longer, and it's going to be over certainly a period of time to go ahead and recover the consumer confidence that right now is broken, despite the fact that there are a number of indications that people are interested in going out and spending some money. We're not seeing that yet. We shall see. The economists will tell you that their accountability is very similar to that of a weatherman. And so they've made their projections. I would suggest to you that our recovery is going to be slower. But a very important thing that I've shared with all of our employees is that you had the foresight since the end of the Great Recession to go ahead and build significant reserves. You did that for a reason. You have said, and councils before you have said, we want healthy reserves for two reasons. Number one, in the event we have economic downturn, nobody envisioned an economic downturn like this, but nevertheless, that we would be able to continue to provide top flight service to our community, despite the fact that there would be an economic downturn. And so the rainy day fund that you have built is substantial, and Lord knows it's not raining, it's pouring right now. And Katie will talk to you about what we see happening when she gets the report for April. So with that in mind, this is going to be an interesting process, and Katie will describe to you where the numbers have come from and what they mean. So with that, Katie.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. So as Larry said, this year has been a lot of changes in the budget process thus far, and we expect more of those to come. As we get more data from sales tax revenues, it'll really help us focus those projections in on what we can really expect to see. Additionally, we haven't gotten updated numbers from the state for state shared revenues yet, so we don't know what those estimates are. To start off, on first glance, here's 2 years of actuals and then last year's budget compared to the current 2020-2021 budget. And we are showing it at a increased amount of $119 million, but we'll go through that and show you why that is higher. We're saying cut, 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 yet we're showing you a higher budget, but there's reasons behind that, and we'll get to that. Additionally, we do have 6.5 new positions in the current budget. As Larry mentioned, these positions are would be frozen at the beginning of the year, and then after the first quarter would be over, that would be when we would look at potentially filling them depending on what our revenues end up being. We have had reductions in all departments. The departments worked really hard in their individual operating budgets to reduce those. We started out the budget process with a 2% expected increase to operating. We came back to them with a 5% decrease compared to the prior year, so essentially a 7% decrease from what they had already provided to us. Additionally, we went back in later and requested that they reduce all travel and training an additional 75% over whatever the prior year budget was. So we did cut a lot of those dollars out of the current budget for many reasons. One being the travel and training isn't something that a lot of people are doing right now with the uncertainty related to COVID. Additionally, we wanted to reduce expenditures in any way we could, and that seemed like a good area to start. As far as our capital improvement plan goes, we did have an increase overall for the whole town of around 36%. There is one large water infrastructure project that contributes around $20 million to that amount, which is the bulk of that increase. Additionally, we did increase the general fund contingency, which increased our other expenditures. And we'll get into that in more depth, but we did put $2.4 million in contingency fund in the general fund. In the event that revenues end up better than expected, or if there is opportunity to use those monies later in the year. Excluding all of the extraordinary items, which are listed on the next page we'll get to, the total budget is actually 10% less than the current year budget. So to make up those, or to explain why it's at $120 million, we do have an election expense this next year for both primary and general election, and that adds around $306,000 to the general fund budget. Additionally, the new positions for both the wages and benefits are around $546,000. And then we added additional funds to transfer to the event center above what they're requesting for their budget in the event their revenues do not meet their projections. It's again, kind of a safety net because they do offset some of their expenses with revenues, but if we were to get another wave of COVID, that could significantly impact what they are receiving. Additionally, the $2.4 million in contingency. Library building repairs is also under the general fund for capital. I know you all are used to seeing that, and that amount has changed time and time again. And we do have matching revenues on the other side for that expenditure. And then the water infrastructure at the $20 million. So subtracting all of those out, we're looking at really more of a realistic budget of around $92 million, which is the 10% decrease compared to the prior year. So for personnel services, this is a graph that shows you over the last 5 budget years and then the proposed budget year, how much those amounts have changed as far as from year to year between budgets. So we're actually only looking at a 0.8% increase or $179,000 increase townwide over the prior year, even with those new positions. And there were a couple of reasons for that. There's no merit increase budgeted currently. There's no COLA budgeted currently. And we do have the hiring freeze in effect till October, so we were able to reduce some personnel costs there. Additionally, There was a decrease of the PSPRS additional contribution because it's based on sales tax revenues received, and with those being less, that amount will be less, as well as a reduction in healthcare premiums. We were able to see a 6.6 reduction in healthcare premiums this year, which really helped offset those other items. For operating expenditures, we cut $195,000 out of repairs and maintenance, $131,000 out of training and travel. We reduced professional services as well as advertising. There were some additions that offset these decreases, including an additional $75,000 for the YMCA funding, which brings that total to $100,000, and the election that we spoke about, and the event center operations. With that, the total operating expenditures did stay relatively minimal, but it's on par with the last couple years as far as what those operations are. Our capital outlay did increase 36%, or $12 million. The general fund, $4.5 million, is due to carryovers of projects that have either already started or were already in the current budget year. And then in special revenue funds, so HERF and our impact fees, we have around $1.8 million due to carryovers, as well as $2 million that is potentially funded by grants. So there is offsetting revenue to meet those capital projects. And then our capital projects fund, we do have the Viewpoint Connector in there, which is a $4.2 million project, and we are starting that this current year. And then in the enterprise funds, there's several wells and tanks that have started and will be carried over into the next fiscal year. Our other expenditures are primarily made up of the contingency budget as well as our depreciation. The contingency budget is the main reason for the increase, and we do have $2.4 million in the general fund contingency, which is close to the maximum we can actually put in there. We are limited by our policy to 5% of the general fund and HERF budgets. The reason why Larry and I had discussed putting this money in the contingency fund is so later on, as we talked with you all, money could be moved to cover certain projects that were previously cut, or personnel needs, or whatever else. And with any of those contingency fund dollars, we do need to come back to council, as you all are aware, to basically get your approval to move any of those funds into other areas. So for our town revenues, we are looking at an 18% decrease for taxes. We're estimating a significant decrease for both our hotel and motel and restaurant, bar, and retail. We still have not gotten our final numbers for April. We're starting to see those numbers trickle in, but we have a few more weeks before the state will close April, so we won't know the impact of the full closure. In March, we actually did better than expected. The grocery stores were up around 15%. But there again, we don't expect that to be sustainable. We expect a lot of the people that did stock away things aren't going back as frequently over the next few months. Hotel and motel did drop significantly. We also saw pretty good increases in areas of travel trailers and things like that, which was kind of a surprise. And we'll see once we get the April numbers, because we came in pretty close to what we had budgeted for the March numbers, but we were only shut down for 2 weeks, and spring break immediately, or was right before the shutdown, where we see a lot of activity. Our reduction to state shared revenue is approximately 22%, and we are looking at further decreases depending on what the state projects through their numbers. There's a lot up in the air right now as far as those numbers are concerned. One positive light in that is the urban revenue sharing, because that is based on 2 years prior income tax revenues. We won't see a hit on that for a few years, but we probably will eventually. We do have the estimated litigation revenue at $48.5 million for the library building. Additionally, we have an offsetting, unidentified at this point, revenue source for the water infrastructure. And then we do have a slight increase in our capacity fees for water and wastewater, which is helpful in the enterprise funds. So we are looking at approximately $97 million for our total revenue budget. However, $20 million of that is for that large capital project. So really we are looking at quite a decrease in our revenues overall. So this slide is our fund balance by fund. The blue columns show you the estimated beginning fund balance, July 1, and then the green line shows the estimated ending fund balance. So you can see every fund on here is going to take a dip. The general fund has been growing over the last few years. In fact, last year we almost added $2 million to the general fund balance, which is extremely helpful when we go through times like this. We have both our stabilization percentage, which is 10% of our general fund revenues, as well as an unassigned fund balance of around $12 million. HERF and impact fee funds and capital project fund all have projects that are happening that are depleting some of the fund balance. And those are the long, large projects that we've been saving up for and started this last year. In our water and wastewater, we also have a pretty hefty capital outlay plan. And with that, it will drop the fund balance slightly. We aren't expecting as much of a drop on our revenues there because our population still has grown and we still have people new to the area coming in and using water. And on the general fund draw on reserves is right around $4 million with everything in the budget as it stands currently. So for general fund expenditures, we're looking at an increase of 0.7 on personnel and 4.1 for operating, as well as 736, 100% for the general fund contingency. And that's because the prior year it was 250,000. It's a large jump there. We also have very limited capital in the general fund by department. It's listed up here. Most of it was either ongoing already or is matched with other revenue sources. Excluding the extraordinary items on this page, which are similar to the total town exclusions, the elections, the new positions that are under the general fund, as well as the event center contingency and library building repairs, we're looking at approximately an 8% decrease compared to fiscal year 19-20. And with that, on the overview, does anyone have any questions on the overall budget before departments start discussing their individual areas?
Councilwoman?
I had a couple general questions. How did we reduce healthcare, that 6.5%? I think that's amazing.
It is. I know Karen is going to be having Barb Lear, who negotiates those rates for us. She'll be coming tomorrow night, and she'll be doing a presentation first thing, and she's the subject matter expert on that.
Barb has a magic wand, and we haven't been able to find it.
Karen will share with you that for the first time in the 9 years that she has been here, we have seen a reduction in premiums for Blue Cross Blue Shield. And the reason for that is that our history over the past 12 months, we have had no major expenses compared to years past. And as a result, we are seeing a healthy percentage drop for a change.
And it's the same vendor? The same vendor, yeah. And then I have a question on rentals and leases. So in some, and since these are general over all of the questions, that's why I'm asking them now. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So in rentals and leases, I noticed some went up, some went down, some went up a lot. What is rentals and leases for? What can you give me an example? Like in engineering, it was up 100%.
It's for a variety of things with equipment and any other things. So you were saying in water or wastewater?
Engineering, public works.
Oh, in public works. I'm
It's
sorry.
up
I thought you were-
100%.
Much of that is leases to Arizona State Land Department that we end up paying, where we are unable to purchase the land and/or right-of-way, and so we end up paying an annual lease.
What about other things like the library, community development, executive management? What kind of leases? I'm just wondering. Oh, so it is that kind of stuff?
What did
Copy machines?
it would be copies, it would be any of the equipment that we don't purchase outright,
Okay, so all the lease stuff.
and it can change depending on.
So we don't really rent property, though.
I mean, real
No,
estate?
we don't.
Yeah, 'cause
we
it says
rent
rentals.
property from Arizona State Land Department.
Okay.
Okay, we have leases for that. We have agreements with some softwares.
Right.
Okay, where they're not purchased outright. We have to pay an annual lease on that. And you'll find that in every department
Right.
where it's been sub-allocated to the departments through IT.
Got it. Then the other question was utilities, same thing. Some went up, some went down. What's that about?
We see them fluctuate from time to time. Just it can be seasonal. It can be dependent on, how hot it is out. Changes our electric, changes our other utilities, and we look at a history on that typically to make sure the department is staying in line with.
Even though everybody's in the same building and it's cost accounted like the other stuff is.
Yeah.
Right. So-
It's been a long-term goal of council to be able to allocate all expenses associated
Right.
with running an individual department. So when it would be much easier, certainly through the IT department, for example, to pay for any of the licensing fees just en masse. But we sub-allocate those.
Right.
So when somebody asks, how much does it cost to run your police department? We have full cost accounting for that.
Right, and that's kind of standard. Okay, I just wondered why some utilities went up and some utilities went down. That's my question. And I can talk to you more about it.
Yeah, they all contain different utilities. Some departments have, gas, water, and electric. Others only have electric. It just depends on the department. It is in the expenditure detail in the back. It does have it by line item, but we can definitely.
And then are you going to tell us later how much we're putting in PRS?
It was $800,000 this year,
Okay.
or excuse me, for the proposed budget year, it's $800,000.
Thank you.
Any other comments, General, for Katie? Larry, you're up.
And I'd certainly like to thank Katie and her team. And Lisa's sitting in the back row, very quietly, not saying a thing, and quite frankly, she ought to be up front, going ahead and getting the credit for a very well done publication. And so hats off to you guys. I suspect you're going to win an award for this one this year. If you would, page 118, the council, you will notice that the council budget has gone down, and we have essentially done that by elimination of one of the two conferences that you would normally have the ability to attend out of town, and that's essentially about the only change in that. Do you have any questions on council? Seeing none, going to page 127, executive management. You'll see that all travel has been eliminated, and council we've cut back on training and conferences. you will see a diminishment. You'll see that on the salary side, there's a 3% increase that's reflected, and that was based on the half-a-year COLA that was put in back in January, and that's the only increase on that. Everything else, we've gone ahead and tightened our belt, so to speak. And once again, depending on what we find out between now and October 1st, where we're keeping a very tight rein on expenditures, we're going to come in under these numbers because we have a freeze on non-essential expenditures. And so we're going to do well with that. And then once again, October 1st will tell us whether we have to tighten the belt further or begin to make some of the improvements you have indicated you would like to see, and or any staffing. Otherwise, there is no staffing. There is a hiring freeze. And so that's exactly what it means. If there are no questions on executive management, I would suggest you go to non-departmental on page 235.
Hang on a second, Larry.
Sorry.
Councilwoman?
So on page 124, under council chat, what exactly does that mean, from 5 to 1?
Second.
Because I personally think we should increase council chats and do a lot more communication, for the record.
Okay, you're looking at page 124. We're talking about channel 56. These goals and objectives were internally generated based on the broader goals and objectives that council has set. So what are you suggesting on it?
I don't know what
I'm
the
guessing-
numbers mean. 6651, what does that mean? The decrease.
I'm not sure where
Your
you're
council chat, the top one?
Yes.
The difference between 5 and 1, what does that mean, those numbers?
I'm not sure I'm following you.
She's referencing fiscal year budget 1920. There was 5
On page 124?
on 124.
The very top line, Larry, in the box.
Okay, the very top line maximum. Okay. Those are the number of council chats. Is that what you're?
That's what she's referencing.
Does this mean we're only going to do 1 next year?
That's what is being proposed there. And why, I don't know. Certainly, it's not expensive to do a council chat.
Right. I don't support
And so if your
that.
suggestion is that you would like to see an increase in the existing number, then if that's your direction, that's certainly easy to do. We can do 12. They're not expensive. That's
I want to do
month.
1 a week.
Pardon?
I want to do 1 a week.
You haven't got that many topics.
Oh, I
That's our challenge.
I beg to differ with you, but that's okay. And then under economic development, yes, that's good.
Are we moving on, Councilwoman?
Sure.
Okay, then we're going to non-departmental, page 235. And non-departmental, with a brief description on that, has a number of things like developer reimbursements. Okay, those are based on development agreements that have been struck years ago, like Crossroads or Marketplace. And that's a percentage of sales tax revenue generated. There was years ago a fairground contribution based on a development agreement. There's the PVEDF contribution. There's the PV Chamber contractual agreement that we have. We have the YMCA contribution. We have the Parkway CFD subsidy. We have the CASA Senior Center annual contribution. We also have an agreement with Prevent Child Abuse, where we go ahead and subsidize them, and then the Arizona Crisis Team similarly receives a contribution. And so that's what you have under non-departmental. I can certainly provide you with that list if you are interested, because I don't believe that you have that breakdown. You will see on page 235 that we have called out in the pie chart that non-departmental is a fairly large part of the budget, and the items that are large ticket items. You've got $2,400. I mean, excuse me, $2,400,000 this year in contingency. Okay, that's bumped up from what last year was $250,000. We've got that contingency number bumped up. Hopefully, we're not going to use it, and we need to exercise a great deal of discipline so that we don't use it. But it's there just for what it says. It is a contingency. So if we see a precipitous drop in revenue over and above what we are already anticipating, that was the transfer from reserves to this line item to help with that. Hopefully, we're not going to be touching it. Are there any questions on non-departmental?
I think the overall theme that we're going to be seeing, Larry, is, we're preparing for the worst, hoping for the best. And then obviously, like we've said, that we're going to revisit this back once we get more established what our numbers are going to look like. I'm sure Katie's going to come in, fingers crossed, with, screaming how great things are and how we bounced back. And then we could just revisit this again. But again, we don't know what we don't know, so this is the best approach to go.
That is absolutely correct. In fact, this is in many ways a rehashing of the existing budget that we're in today, but with some strategic cuts that have been made in that. And you will see our expenditures come in dramatically under what we would normally have in the first quarter of this new fiscal year. That's on the expenditure side. Will it be enough? That's an open question. We don't know. Sure. And so to your point, Mayor, you hit the nail on the head, is that we are going to be very thrifty. We've done this before. Sadly, we're experienced at this. And we have received kudos from governments around the state on how we managed our way through the Great Recession. Here we are again. And that's about it.
I think we might be surprised at May figures. Out of curiosity today, I drove around to check the stores that opened. I couldn't get in. The waiting lines were too long. Now, that will dissipate. But I'm glad that that's happening, because it'll give us a better May than we thought we were going to have.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. My crystal ball is as good as Katie's, and they're both pretty darn cloudy.
Well, and the other point I think that's important is that our businesses are honoring the safety of the customers. And that's why there were such long lines outside. And so it was just double good news for me as I was driving around checking that all out today.
And if that's it, then
Okay,
Mr. Parker, I believe you're up.
Thank you.
Did we skip the town clerk?
We're on 3D, aren't we?
I'm second to last.
Sorry.
Am I wrong? Are we not on? It's 3D, isn't David? Okay.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Mr. Parker, welcome.
Thank you. This is very much like the last recession we had. I remember having that conversation. Difference in my group is we continue to have calls for service, very much like the police. As I mentioned before, we don't have to rush to provide that service, but we have a time frame that we're expected to do that, and that's within the day that we receive that call for service. And we're going to adhere to that. We've also, when we had our budget retreat before we fell on difficult times, there was a concern because of the backlog that was created in my office based on the master plan submittals that was caused by the adoption of the most recent building codes. And I can report to you we're less than 10 working days on every plan set, including commercial plans in community development. So that has been a welcome improvement. I really like Katie's graphics. I got really tired of Bill's pie charts.
Yes, I agree.
These are simple. We did add that plans examiner. That was in place of a building inspector position that we had posted as part of last year's budget, but that's reflected in the upcoming budget, increasing one new staff person. We are reducing training. We still will have an obligation to train people to maintain their certificates. Certification in the building safety world is important because it affects everybody's insurance in town. We also have an ongoing commitment under capital. We've been working to implement over the last 3 years Excella automation, and we have contractual obligations to fulfill that and finalize that this year. We're well underway. Just before the COVID-19 problem, we were scheduling the final seminars with our consultant to be able to go live by January of the upcoming year. I think we're going to push that by 2 or 3 months because they don't want to see us and we don't want to see them. Building continues, as you've seen. Many of the commercial construction projects have been put on hold, pushed out. A couple of them that come to mind are a couple of intended hotels. Circle K, the second Circle K, they broke ground, but they decided to pull back. We have gone through all the building permit processes on that, so they're on hold temporarily. And moving forward into the future, they would just simply have to notify us of their need for inspection services. So we're primed and ready to go on those. We continue to have calls for service every day. Today, every one of the inspectors had greater than 20 inspections to perform, so we're still busy. With that in mind, we cut back our operating costs as required or requested by management. We still burn fuel. We still need tires. I encourage inspectors to ride in the same vehicle when at all possible, even though that means that they're closer than 6 feet. But they are performing those inspections, seeing each other every day. Because people are in the field, we've encouraged building safety personnel to wear masks when they encounter people in the field. So they go to inspections, they put on their mask, and they go in and complete that inspection. And as you know, we were open for service even though the Civic Center was closed. And I've got to tell you, when Larry told me we were going to close the Civic Center and we needed to figure out how to continue to provide services, needed to compliment the staff that I work with, because we initially thought about the drop box where they drop off utilities. And Sandy Griffith pointed out that she couldn't put a giant roll of plans in there. So they innovated and came up with something that kept the wheels moving, and that was a file system out front. Coincidentally, the city of Prescott called us and asked how that's working. We told them, of course, it's working quite well. We still have that available to people out front, and they are using it as opposed to coming into the building. They're dropping off plans. They're picking up plan sets. I think I saw you do the same thing as well. So that seems to be working, and I suspect that's going to continue into the near term. But we're getting by. We'll get by on the cut as necessary, and it'll be business as usual. We will not be having, because of COVID, principally in scheduling, the next regularly scheduled Planning and Zoning Commission meeting will be in July 13th. During this time, we've been fortunate that there was kind of a lull in applications coming forward, but you'll be seeing applications as a result of outcomes of the Planning and Zoning Commission's review as early as the first meeting in August. With that, I'd respond to any questions you have.
Vice Mayor.
I don't have a question. I want to just tell you, my church implemented your Dropbox plan. That's how they communicated and picked up things, and so you did a community service. You helped other organizations, so I just wanted to point that out.
It worked tremendously well, a whole lot better than I'd originally. There was an expenditure of what Larry would believe would be a non-essential item, We had to buy a cart big enough to be able to move it in and out of the building because I had building safety personnel picking up the filing cabinet and dragging it out front because we didn't have a cart. So I economized and we bought a cart for $80 to accommodate that, so it goes out in the morning and back in the evening. Larry didn't know about it, but we got by.
I was going to suggest you could have used Larry's Ford, but then again, it's Ford.
Yeah. I do very much appreciate the way this has been handled. In times past, during the recession, I was very proud as a department director to be able to say, you have a job. Keep coming to work. There wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. We got to lay everybody off and right size the organization. It was done gradually. We got to where we needed to be. The Community Development Department in 2009, just a reminder, issued one residential building permit. My friend Joe Contadino, he pulled one residential new start in December of 2009. I dare say we're issuing more than that point, but that was a sad time. We had to economize where necessary. And it is a sad fact that we've done this well in the past, and obviously we're prepared to continue to economize into the future. Questions?
Richard, thank you, sir. Sorry.
Okay.
Richard, and on the sheet that came out today from YCCA, I noticed that our permits went up this month, for April.
They have.
A lot.
They have, yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, it's been interesting that there has been a lot of spec building in the market because people really want to move here. And that spec inventory has gone down a little bit, so people are now desiring to move forward with them. Also, as you're aware, we had a project just south of Pronghorn Ranch that stopped. They are back grading as of first part of this week, and that'll add inventory and it'll add a different product to the market that wasn't available. During the last several years, the town was running lower on a variety of products. Quailwood is a good example. Quailwood is completely built out, so there's no additional room for that. But we do have a lot of apartments and commercial construction underway, and we fully expect that as the economy returns to previous levels, that stuff will start again. I did experience the same kind of thing. I was over by Kohl's, and I saw a lady come out of Kohl's, and I stopped her and asked her how she's doing because she was beaming. She had packages.
Yes.
And she said, I enjoyed that stimulus a great deal. So hopefully those predictions will be good. I'd respond to questions. If not, I'll sit down.
Nothing else, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't see the judge here. Are we not doing him this evening? Unless I'm wrong. 3E?
Yep.
If not, we can just move on to Mr. Legler.
Hi.
Welcome, sir.
You know, I'm never invited to speak. I always have to jump in and, you know.
We're well aware of that, sir.
Do you have any questions of me?
I think Katie mentioned something in regards to what our anticipated litigation. Do you want to touch on that a little bit? How we came to that number? I believe it's $4.5 million.
The town is in litigation, as you know, and there is a date of September 2nd through September 30th for a trial in the case. Unfortunately, of course, the COVID-19 impact on the courts isn't certain. And there has been some talk and some concern that the parties in the case would attempt to go to the judge and say, we'd like to have that be postponed. We are doing all we can to let people know that despite COVID-19, we believe that that's a solid date, and unless the courts have a problem with it, we'd sure like to keep it. And that is primarily so that we will keep their feet to the fire and we will be able to finally bring what is now 3.5 years of litigation to completion.
And that was my question for those at home that are trying to keep track of how long this has been going on, but it's 3.5 years.
3.5 years. And so the right at the moment, in fact, starting tomorrow, there will be some electronic mediation that will go on among all the parties. We have presented approximately $10 million in damages that we believe we've suffered. And that will be what we will be talking about. Now, do we expect to settle for that amount? We don't.
Sure.
But having said that, we expect to settle for close to that amount if we can.
Okay.
And so we are looking forward to that process. But as you know, mediation, you do mediation while at the same time you're doing depositions and preparing for trial. So we'll see what happens.
Fair enough.
I do want you to keep pressing. I like that you're not
Right.
at all letting them off the hook.
We certainly are trying not to. You know, all parties, when you look at the litigation, you see that we have approximately 15 named lawyers involved in this case.
That's disgusting.
So it's quite a process. And insurance companies will end up being heavily involved. We are in the middle of a mediation, a mediator who's trying to bring all the parties together. We'll see what happens.
And props to you and Stephen for just grinding it out and just like the vice mayor said. I mean, and I hear Stephen all day, every day. It seems like he's on a conference call or he's doing good work for the town of Prescott Valley. So
Yes. Any other questions?
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We appreciate you, Ivan.
Thank you. That's
Chief.
kind of you. And as you know, the people that actually do the work are Stephen and Bob and Cindy and Carol and Irma.
Mr. Humble and you.
Well, if they come and catch me dozing, you know, they quietly leave so that I won't be startled.
No, they try to wake you up. Mr. Mayor, would you like me to take the magistrate courts?
Do you want to, if you're capable of doing that, that'd be great.
Right. If you would turn to page 202. The important part, I believe, looking at that is not only has there been cost cutting like all departments have done, but you take a look at the clearance rate that is proposed in FY 2021. The proposed clearance rate is 120%, i.e. They are taking care of any backlog. I believe that they're easily going to be able to hit that clearance rate because during the slowdown, there has been less activity out on the streets. So in other words, the number of cases going before the magistrate court has been reduced for the month of April, and in large part because traffic is way down. Accidents are down as well for that, let's say, 45-day period. But the court is catching up on some things that they had gotten behind on, and they're doing a good job and reducing their cost at the same time. So,
All right, with that being said, Chief, you're up.
Mr. Mayor and Council.
Welcome.
Good evening tonight. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Police Department's budget overview. If you can turn to page 226, which is in front of you, it should be. As far as staffing is concerned, we're requesting that 3 new positions for the Police Department. One would be a new police officer. One would be a new police officer, one would be a new commander, and then the third would be a new community service officer. The officer, contrary to what my boss told you just recently, calls for service are increasing, and especially since everybody's out there after being in hiatus for a while.
Yep.
We are seeing an increase in accidents and speeders and citations, so the judge is going to be busy here very soon. But in relation to that, we need to have an officer to assist with calls to keep up with the demand of service for our officers. The commander, the reason I'm asking for a commander is because I want to organize our command structure with the police department. Instead of being linear, I want to make it more appropriate for a police department our size and organize the department to have more control over the divisions that we represent and deal with. And then as far as the community service officer, we are seeing an increase in community-related programs like the Prescott Valley Police Department's Alzheimer's initiative, the Block Watch program. We're going to be implementing a virtual Block Watch program here soon. The Citizens Police Academy, the Youth Police Academy, National Night Out, Coffee with a Cop, and Lunch with our elementary youth, to just mention several there. As far as budgetary reductions, we, just like every other department, have been looking intensively into where we can reduce our budget. Some of the more impactful to our staff is going to be the training and travel budget, nearly $60,000 in reduction for per diem, lodging, transportation, seminars, and conferences. We still need to maintain some of our certificates and certifications throughout the year, and we're going to try to do that with the remaining budget that we have. We have been intently reviewing current and future contracts. One to note is the animal control contract that's coming up. We spoke with the Yavapai Humane Society, and we were able to reduce their contract for this year up nearly $7,000. We've also looked at the review of software updates and fees. We reduced several of our programs that we have, CopLinks, Lexapol, which is our policy system, and Blue Team, which is our internal investigations and tracking system, by almost $3,000. We also just recently purchased the Faro system and have been looking at other equipment for the police department that we keep up with. We negotiated the purchase price of some of those equipment, or those pieces of equipment, and we're able to reduce the rate in both the equipment and the software costs for that as well, while we still maintain the product's integrity. Some capital improvements, we drastically reduced some of these, but there are some that we still need to really pay attention to because it's going to affect our communications ability and the way that we interact with the public. So our TriTech system, the console system upgrade with PRCC, which is the Prescott Regional Communications Center, we're asking for $80,000 and $383 for that. The radio upgrades, which is a continual issue, because of Yavapai County and the terrain that we deal with, there's always some sort of new communication issue that comes. The latest is going to be upgrades concerning the radio towers, locations of various systems that are required for the coverage. That's about $12,000. And then the portable radar signs. We have decided that we're going to go ahead and continue with those because we feel that those are very helpful for us for our traffic enforcement and just to remind people and educate people of their speeds and their ability to drive safely in the community. So we're looking at purchasing 2 portable speed signs to assist with the current ones that we have on Robert Road. These will be able to be moved to various locations throughout the town as it's needed. And that's about it. Is there any questions?
Got a couple quick questions.
Yes.
Our PANT budget shows it looks like we doubled from last year. It looks like we added a position. Is that?
No. So what we did is PANT recently informed us that they no longer are going to need the services of one of our sergeants. So we're going to actually bring that sergeant back to the police department in July, and he's going to be my new administrative sergeant, conducting specific investigations, internal investigations, Blue Team inquiries, and stuff like that. So we're going to be responsible for the 75% of the officers' budget or resources over there. PANT will provide 25% of that.
Gotcha. So we're just no new position. We just started paying this.
No new position. We've always had a detective over there and a supervisor. We're actually going to reduce the supervisor and bring them back to home and to our community to help us with our services directly in Prescott Valley.
Gotcha. Vice Mayor?
I had governing board meeting last night with West Shakopee Guidance Center as one of their board members, and they asked me this question, and I couldn't answer them.
Sure.
They're acutely aware of the increase of domestic violence, of course, because they get the same kind of calls you get.
Yes.
This is a question they asked me. Do you record how many of them are children and adolescents and how many are against adults?
We do. We do.
Okay, good.
We have a child crimes
Good.
unit within the SART unit, and they pay particular attention as we log all of those, and we're responsible for providing that information to victim services throughout the state of
their
Arizona.
calls, they were having more against the children and adolescents. Is that what you're experiencing?
With the COVID-19 and the everything that's been occurring here, we have seen an uptick in domestic violences. So the incidents that you're referring to are more of youth on youth. So like brothers and sisters getting into arguments and acting out aggressively, and we're handling those as the situations come. But we haven't seen a real serious influx in that.
Okay, thank you. I'll reassure them that you do break that
Absolutely.
Information out.
Okay.
Chief? Yeah.
Councilwoman?
Chief, so back to PANT, what the mayor was talking about, where it said on page 234, where it says 82.9% increase, that's not correct, right? That'll go down one person?
Okay, let me look at that. Page 234.
Yeah. So it says you're projecting an 82.9% increase in the PANT budget, but that's not what you just said.
Yeah, that's 82 point. That should be minus.
No, I believe it's still going to be an increase because we still have that position that was usually paid 75% paid by a grant or by PANT, and then now we are now taking up that 75% of the sergeant's salary. I believe that's would make for that.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, so I'm sorry. Yes, that's exactly what's going to take place. Is we're going to have to assume that cost of bringing that sergeant back to.
Right, but they're not going to stay in the PANT budget.
No.
So that'll be changed. Right.
Yes.
So my concern then, because I know I'm familiar with task forces and all that and how they get funded, but if we reduce a person, is that going to reduce the amount of time the task force is in Prescott Valley?
No, in fact, so what has happened is Yavapai County Sheriff's Department actually increased the sergeant's position to fill in for the vacancy for Sergeant Martin, who's leaving, and they actually added another additional sergeant to work in their financial section, their financial crimes section of PANT. So what I've experienced over the last month and a half with that new group that is already in place is an uptick in the amount of responses to our town. Recently, we've conducted multiple search warrants and investigations within the town of Prescott Valley, which have resulted in several arrests and recovery of weapons.
They go where the bad guys are, not by what the money's spent.
Yes.
Good.
Correct.
So then on
doing
page
a great job.
Yeah, on page 216.
Okay.
Under your objectives, I don't see anything about fentanyl in here, and that seems like that's the most important bad thing going on right now.
So we didn't specify a particular drug, but we are definitely increasing our approach towards narcotic enforcement. So fentanyl, you're right. I mean, I think that fentanyl is on the top of the list of everybody's concern because that's like the today's premier drug that's coming into society. It's the one that's really affecting the way that we've had a few overdoses from it and everything else. It doesn't mean that we're neglecting that. In fact, over the course of the next 6 months to the next year, I want to try to upgrade that within our department with our own officers that we have to assist and help out with PANT in that narcotics.
I was hoping you would say that. I just didn't see it here. So that may be an objective you want to add.
Okay.
And then my last question for you is third from the bottom. Just explain what this means to me. Continue to work on our overtime budget to properly identify those areas in need of proper staffing. What does that mean?
So I think it's important for every department, not just the police department, but for us to continually work on reducing the amount of overtime that we incur and try to be more efficient and effective with the time that we already have. It's important for everybody, and that this was placed in here specifically to remind people and remind my staff that it's very important for us to watch this on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Try to reduce it.
I couldn't, I was trying to follow it. I thought that's what you meant, and I'm glad you said that.
Okay.
Councilman?
Something that may have been overlooked when you're talking about fentanyl. The fourth bullet point up from the bottom talks about MAT Force. That is one of the MAT Force initiatives, is fentanyl.
Okay, good.
So that would be indirectly applied.
And you're correct. I just didn't touch on that. I was going to speak about it, but yes, MAT Force is.
A few comments, Chief. One, it doesn't relate to your budget, but if you could communicate to PANT that we would love their commander or their lieutenant to come to a work study sometime in the future and just discuss what they do. I think it would be beneficial to not only residents but as well as council to inquire on some questions. So if we can maybe make a note of that.
Yeah, I'll get with Nate Avensheim about that. Now, he is kind of stretched thin right now because he's taking over NARDA as well.
Okay.
And I'm not quite sure exactly what the direction is of YCSO at this point. I know they're going to be getting a new sheriff coming in, and but I'll make sure to reach out to him. He has come and spoken to crowds in the past about the drug-related issues concerning Prescott Valley in the past.
And I think,
sure to reach out.
And that'd be just perfect. I mean, it doesn't have to happen next month, but at some point, if you can just get us on the calendar, that'd probably be great.
Absolutely.
So, and I know one thing that I'd just like to, from my personal opinion, I know Larry as a town manager almost treats every department head like his child and says, hey, I try to be even with everybody. You know, he doesn't play favorites. He just wants to be an even hand when it comes to certain things.
Sure.
When it comes to your department, and I don't have that, you know, I still see it as a needs point of view, whether it's because I'm familiar with it or because I really truly hear it from the public in regards to what their needs are, what they expect. Yes. So for you to speak to the councilwoman about, hey, you're hoping to maybe in the future have an in-house couple officers target directly related to Prescott Valley issues, I think the citizens would love to hear that we had a targeted group, whether they're taking off a very minuscule amount of drugs, it's still happening here in Prescott Valley, and they would be more beneficial or would encourage that more. And I think we would see that, or at least I personally, I don't want to speak for the council, would rather see that. So when the clouds clear and the sun comes out, I encourage you to put together a plan to be more proactive and say, this is how we are going to address drugs, drunk driving, traffic, and just have that wish list and let council decide if that's a need or not.
And I do have plans. It's because of what has happened in our world recently and stuff, and because of budgetary constraints, some of those plans are just going to have to be put off right now. But that doesn't mean that we are going to neglect them.
Great.
My officers they do a great job out there, and I know that they'll listen to what I have to say and respond effectively.
No, that's terrific. And I know, like I said, you may go to your boss and he may give you that, I can't treat anyone any different, but we may encourage you to perhaps push the envelope a little bit.
Yeah, we're trying to maintain the 1.7 to per 1,000 capita. The census coming out is going to really, it's probably going to determine how we really approach the next couple of years.
And in no way am I lowering the other departments. So for those that are listening and those that are present, we constantly hear, or at least I constantly hear, police is a high-profile, department. So we're gonna hear about things, and that's just kind of how it goes. So obviously, we know all departments are important, but when this comes to service, I think you got to be more proactive. Absolutely. Obviously, as a police officer, as opposed to some other departments that we have. So I appreciate your time, sir.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. I just want to say that I wasn't slamming you on overtime. I think how low your overtime is the lowest I've ever seen it anywhere, so I'm pretty impressed with that. And when you say the 2 officers or the 1 officer that's going to focus on drugs here, is that within 2021?
I'm sorry, rephrase
Fiscal
that.
year. So when you said you want 1 or 2 officers in-house to focus more on drugs, is that your plan for 2021, or is that future?
I do have plans. Mr. Mayor will reiterate this. In the past, you have had like a proactive squad, a net enforcement squad, or a community enforcement squad that would respond proactively to situations that are dire to the community, like drug enforcement, gang enforcement type stuff. So, my future plans, without kind of unveiling them all, are that I would really like to approach that in the future.
Future 2021.
Future 2021.
Start it in 2021.
Possibly, yes.
Cool. And then I had something else, but I don't remember it. Oh. So when you do that, what the mayor was talking about, being more proactive, can we take that show on the road to like Kiwanis and Rotary and let people know it's happening?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the community responds very well to us right now as far as how proactive we are. Your officers are doing a fabulous job. I couldn't have stepped into a better position. Your officers are out there making arrests on a regular basis. I had to actually pull them back multiple times for the COVID reaction because they wanted to go out there and do proactive police work. But at this time of need, with the community, we didn't want to put much more pressure on the community than what was needed.
Toot your horn.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Any other questions for the chief? Sir, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Davis? Don't act all surprised like you're up, like you didn't know it was your turn.
We skipped Fatima.
You're skipping me.
Oh, maybe that's why. That's why I skipped it. Fatima, we're saving the best for last.
Okay, thank you.
You're fine.
If I'm up, I'm ready. Good evening, Mayor, Council. It's with pleasure I present the Public Works budget tonight. Happy to give a couple of highlights I just wanted to touch upon. Operation on our safety service levels, we're going to maintain those. We are going to be constrained, but keep in mind we do have business to do every day, keeping our transportation network viable and safe. In addition, I always like to point out facilities and fleet. Obviously smaller departments, but we've done a good job in this COVID environment with the facilities department. We've actually changed some of our delivery of services to where you see some of that less public use. We've actually done more sanitizing. So we'll continue that in this environment, and we'll stay in tune with whatever the direction is from the CDC and or what the current environment is. We'll make sure we deliver that. Likewise with fleet, there's going to be no capital investment in vehicles, but we've got a great team in place there to use our outsourced vendors in order to keep our fleet maintained and operational. So we will maintain those service levels, and we will bring to council in June, like we always do, our outsourced vendors. We will keep those people constrained, but we do have business to do, so we'll keep a watchful eye on our revenues and also our service levels and make sure we do that with our annual vendors. We'll bring that to you in June. Let's talk about our engineering and GIS departments. We're going to support the continued community surge we're seeing right now in development. You're seeing it all over with Granville, and Granville's even gone on both sides of Glassford Hill Road, and we'll support those particular needs. Council also seeing that Jasper Parkway, we purchased that right away. We look forward to seeing that particular roadway and supporting that design. So even though we've got revenue loss in retail, we're seeing a surge in development that we're going to keep up with. I think Richard Parker touched upon that. We're seeing a surge. We're going to keep up with that with how we support the public improvements that go along with the development. Likewise, with some of the commercial, we're keeping a close eye on making sure our public amenity that's adjacent to the new developments, we have some projects planned that we will have a small investment in some of the existing infrastructure, but significant development requirement of the infrastructure they have to do with adding a lane and a curb gutter and sidewalk. So we have several projects coming up we're going to support there. I think Katie touched upon this and the manager about some of our existing projects that we've started and will carry over to the new year. Most exciting one is probably the Sunset Lane completion. We do have a placeholder there, but we're looking very forward at the end of June that the long-awaited Sunset Lane. I do want to point out our partnership with Yavapai County. Basically 50% of that particular project was funded through the county, but we're looking forward at the end of June of that being substantially complete and a very complicated project at times with all of the different utility service and the partnership we've had with the public out there, the adjacent residents. A very small corridor, but we're looking forward to that being done. But that one will be complete this year. And we've touched upon the Viewpoint Connector, very, very large project, a mile of roadway across the state line, Section 2. And that project's basically going to be about half done. And we look forward to the coming budget year to complete that project in spring of 2021. So that will be ongoing. And I did touch upon some of the developer participation. Some of our particular capital projects are in conjunction, as I touched upon. The Long Look pavement placement we're going to do is the Park Place apartments there. You see at Long Look in Glassford, we're participating there. In addition, we've got some hope that there's going to be some commercial development up in the Viewpoint Pronghorn area that we're going to participate with the developer, make a small contribution to the large and manage some of the projects that the adjacent public works need to do for the street and curb gutter and sidewalk improvements. And the last one, we're working right now with the Glasser Hill Spouse signal improvements. That's a visible project with the park improvements for Santa Fe Park. We're going to work with the developer to actually deliver the additional fourth leg of that intersection for access to the park. So that's actually developer funded too. So this next year, I'm looking forward in Public Works to our engineer department supporting what I would call very small contributions to very large to make the project whole for the development community is doing. And that Glassford Spouse signal improvements is one of those. That's our development impact fee, and we're going to help manage that. We're actually very good with our staff at managing projects, so we've gained the confidence of the development community. They say, you guys go do it for us. And we deliver that with their money, so to speak, as a contribution. So it's been a nice model we have in place. That's the overview of Public Works. I'll be happy to answer any specific questions you have about the budget.
Councilwoman?
Norm, on page 207, under facilities at the bottom, it says refine preventative maintenance schedules. What does that word refine mean?
As we continue to look at the preventive maintenance to do our preventive maintenance schedules, our refining is just that. Where can we do better on identifying preventative maintenance to where that you don't get that catastrophic failure? We've got quite a, let's take the HVAC systems. We've got a monthly review of, that's doing the work day in, day out that maybe not as glamorous, but making sure that you top off the oil, so to speak.
Right.
You check this, you change the filters, you look for any wear items that are coming. Weird noises, that's part of the preventive maintenance they like to do. Make sure those big capital expenditures don't happen.
And that has nothing to do with the sales tax annual improvements to chip seal?
No, not in facilities.
Okay.
No.
And then you're increasing your fleet services department, it looks like.
Actually, we just did some reorganizing. So before we had the same position, but now we made a fleet service supervisor this past budget year, and that's been put into, and then there's a service technician that serves under him. So it's a department of two, and I understand in the budget that was rearranged for where the money comes from.
You're adding a person in fleet services, it says.
It was a prior position that previously done by street.
Okay, so it's just moved over there? Okay. And then on, I'm sorry?
Emily.
It's an entry-level position that came from the street department.
Okay.
But for the most part, we don't have a fleet services department. That's all outsourced activity. They manage that process, but the actual work is outsourced.
I don't have a problem with it. I just was asking that. And
specifically, the net was a 0. They were both similar. We had to retire to Bruce Handley, so we made Jim Crow the supervisor, and then we internally promoted Phil Stoneburner into the fleet service technician. So Jim supervised them before they had different duties.
That's not how I read that, but that's okay. I'll talk to Katie. And on the next page on 211, under operating expenditures, it says decrease in engineering divisional professional services for outsourced engineering services. What impact on our services will that have?
Quite simply, that the town engineering services, that can be one of those that is kind of unknown at the beginning of the budget year, but we've reduced in order to make the cuts. We'll just have to do less outsource engineering if projects do come up.
So that's like mowing and all that stuff?
No, the engineering services would be the town engineer agreement. That's
Okay.
typically around $65,000 a year, so that's a.
So you'll do
fluid type-
more in-house? Do we have an engineer in-house that can do that?
We don't do much in-house engineering at all. We just do management. So when we were asked to make the cuts, a lot of that hasn't even been identified. It's as it comes forward. We have years to where that's a robust type of need, and other times, what's coming forward. Let's take, for instance, I mentioned some of the other projects we have with the development committee. Dave and Associates will do that particular design, and that's where we look for those services.
Okay.
Other questions for Norm? Thanks, Norm.
Thank you.
Sorry for calling you out. You were absolutely right. It wasn't your turn. And then, sure enough, having you come up. Fatima, you can stay there and talk if you want, if it's easier for you. Or do you need the computer?
Well, mine is very short. So when it rains, it pours. Our department is going from 4 full-time employees to 3 full-time employees. Heather Waldrop, who is our loss control manager, is moving to human resources, and we will miss her. Like everybody else, we had training and travel budget cuts. And as Katie mentioned, we do have an increase of $306,063 for primary and general election costs. If we didn't have elections this year, our department budget would only be about $350,000. The budget will cover costs again for the primary and the general election. We just recently transferred $24,000 to cover the cost of postage and election printing. But because there's other items to deal with elections, a big chunk of it is to pay the contract we have with Yavapai County. Because without their help, we wouldn't be able to hold a cost-effective election. Any questions?
Go ahead.
Fatima, so on page 134, the sixth one from the bottom where it says, compare town and state liquor license files to town business license to assure all establishments are properly licensed and the town is receiving the correct licensing fees and sales tax. Are you familiar with the way Prescott does their liquor licenses, where they don't take it to council?
They don't?
No.
That is required by state statute.
It is state statute.
Yeah. Maybe because they're charter?
Probably.
Maybe.
The state liquor department requires that it go before communities and get a recommendation from the local governing body.
Yeah, they don't do it. I've processed in both places, and
wow.
We can show you the state statute.
yeah, no, I understand, but I'm just telling you they don't. Maybe it's because they're a charter. That just struck me.
Yeah.
And then where it says on the next page, electronic documents created from 31,000 last year to 15,000. That's a 50% drop. So what is that? What kind of impact is that?
We do have a new records tech, and she was being trained last year. Our previous records tech had a project of scanning every single item into Laserfish, and that's just pretty much it. Maybe she got caught up with the work.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good answer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilman.
Just a real quick question. If we don't need the November election, what kind of impact will that have on the cost?
If we don't need the November election, we'll actually be saving then part of the contract with the Yavapai County for $134,459.
Okay.
Cross your fingers.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No other questions? Nice job, Fatima.
Thank you.
Welcome back, ma'am.
Hello, I'm back. So We do have an increase for the finance department of 5.2% in personnel. That is due to a part-time customer accounts representative position for customer accounts and utility billing. Again, like we've discussed, that one would not be filled unless things turn around by October. Additionally, we had a 5% reduction in operating across my department, and we removed all travel and training expenses, as well as we were able to reduce bank fees. And with that, if anyone has any questions.
Katie, is this packet that you gave us, not the budget, but the packet you gave us tonight, is that going to be available online for people to see, or do we know that?
We can definitely put that online.
Yeah, it's a great job. You've simplified it, and a regular citizen can get out there and find things, and it's just an awesome job.
Okay, well, we will definitely put that on before our meeting tomorrow night, and we'll have the second half of that as well.
Nice.
Additionally, the entire tentative budget book is available for citizens on our website.
Right. Yeah, just the two in comparison, this is just a great job. So thank you for that. Any other comments or questions for Katie? If not, we're going to adjourn for the evening. Thank you, ma'am.